This is Pokemon Pisces, one of the most anticipated ROM hacks of 2025. The game sets itself a couple of years after the events in Hoenn where Rayquaza had to save the region from Groudon and Kyogre, but you're not just playing through regular Hoenn like usual. The entire region has been remapped, so you will definitely recognize a couple of places, but they will look very different from what you're used to. But that's only scratching the surface, as they have over 200 original Fakemon with amazing designs, lore, and new abilities for you to explore. They even have an entire new type as well called Relic and rebalance the type chart accordingly. There's also a couple of new statuses like Blooming and Panic that you'll see in action later in the video. There's so many returning characters like Archie and Maxie that have an entire story to tell you. The super talented team behind this Pebbler Platoon really pulled out all the stops, redesigning nearly everything you know about regular Pokemon Emerald and breathing in a ton of fresh air. So strap in, grab yourself a snack and a drink because we'll be going through everything Pokemon Pisces has to offer right here, right now. When you start your journey, you don't get greeted by your regular professor. Instead, it's a very familiar face and someone who helped you out in your previous adventure, Briny, and his Pico, who has now changed into a walking fish. He's bringing you back to Hoenn from the Sevi Island because a couple of years ago, you moved there after your adventure was done. And when you get to the character selection screen, you can indeed pick between Brandon and May. They just look way happier than they usually do. And they've also gotten a little bit older. In this story, we're also going to be the child of Professor Birch, and we have given up the life of a Pokemon trainer a long time ago to pursue research. Hence why we're on this boat without any Pokemon on us. After this, you are free to explore the boat until we arrive, and there is actually a couple of characters on here that we will be seeing a lot more of, like this purple-haired guy, a man that's buried in mountains of paperwork, some Team Aqua members who have totally been disbanded at this point and even been reformed into something totally different. But we'll be getting to that when the time is right. The last person we talked to is Drake, a former Elite Four member and Dragon-type master who's in search of two legendary fish Pokemon that bring harmony wherever they go. And if we want to know more about them, we need to meet up with him in Sootopolis City. So we definitely have to keep that in mind. But for now, we're going to get off the ship because we have arrived in pacificlog Town, where we immediately get greeted by our father, Professor Birch. He has moved his facility from Litterroot all the way over here and expanded it greatly with an entire research team behind him. On our way to the lab, we start reminiscing about the last time I was in Hoenn and that I had to cut my journey short because my rival and the daughter of Norman, May, one-upped me every time. But Dad keeps on telling me that we did not let him down and he's super proud of the work we've done as a professor so far. But the weird thing about May is that she has not been seen ever since she became champion when we left. And the only people that know anything about this is her family that don't really want to talk about it. We of course want to reconnect with our childhood friends, so we'll be searching the entire region for her until we find them. Dad also warns me that the Hoenn region has changed a lot and is basically an entire new place. And he clearly wants to spend some quality time with me, but he also senses that we want a redo of all those years ago. So we can be the one that goes above and beyond this time, not May. And because he knows me so well, he's going to set me up with my second ever starter Pokemon. But they're not your familiar faces of Mudkip, Torchic, and Trico. As so many new Pokemon have repopulated this region, we now get to pick between the Snapping Flower, Tidbit, the Fiery Lizard, Fiferite, and the Little Prince of Atlantis, Prongy. Took me a while before I could choose between these three, which is a very good thing. Starters are always going to be a main selling point on any Pokemon game, but in the end, I chose the Fire-type Fiferite, who I will be naming after the wonderful channel members that are supporting the channel. Just like most other Pokemon that you will be seeing in this run, but unfortunately I don't have enough members to keep up with the Pokemon I'll be capturing. So if you're interested in supporting the channel and want to fill up those spots, it is always very much appreciated. With that out of the way, we get our Pokedex, which has been wiped clean from the first time we used it, and my dad also set up a special challenge for me at the Sky Pillar. Because we haven't battled in a while and he wants to get the rust off of me. After this, I get to explore the newly designed pacificlog town, and I have to say that I love this fisher town even more than in the original. It's amazing what a couple of fish barrels, boxes, and coral can do to the aesthetic of a game, because this now really felt like a vibrant town with the life force of 1,000 fishermen injected into it. There was also a couple of NPCs here, like the fisherman that had 6 satsons as his team members. These are sort of like this region's Magikarp and only evolve when their happiness level is 0. So you really have to keep these guys around until they evolve into their final form. They're also incredibly weak, so we beat all 6 of them very easily and got ourselves our first ever Old Rod. This made me feel even more welcomed in this fishing town, and I immediately used it to fish up the water type fish Gubspar and the super cute snail friend that clearly takes inspiration from Gary in the SpongeBob universe. The Pokemon centers here are also not only used to heal your Pokemon, you can also buy stuff from shops and spend your time gambling at the lottery. And I immediately got hooked in with a Beast Ball as my very first prize. With the town fully checked out, I headed over to Sky Pillar, and this thing somehow looks even more majestic than I used to remember it by. But the strong Pokemon like Sableye, Claydol, and Golbat that once lived here have been replaced with tiny little friends like Burm, the grass Pokemon, the little rat normal poison type Ixqueak, and the fire normal type Quillword. Once I added all of these to my team, I climbed up to the top of this pillar where I had to fight 3 Pokemon Rangers. What I found really cool about trainer battles in this region is that every single type has been totally redesigned. I mean, just look at the Pokemon Ranger from Pokemon Emerald and this one, and it's not even close. This one looks way cooler. And that's now the case with nearly every single trainer class. Cool or not, I still got the better of them quite easily and returned back to the lab to report to my dad. He is convinced that we can start our very own badge quest, so he sends me out to Sootopolis City to get my first one. In the regular games, you can only get to Sootopolis by surfing a lot, then diving or flying into it, but now there is an entire way made to get over there. Along this road, I had to destroy so many hopes and dreams from little kids that just started out their journeys as well. I also juiced up my team a bit with a couple of encounters like the sushi Pokemon Ebibi. This guy then pounced on me out of a barrel and literally gave me the pounce TM. And yes, I sued this guy over physical harassment if that's what you're wondering about. After this, our path led us to Basseling Coast, where we get an introduction to rest stops. These are in fact different from regular Pokemon centers and are mostly placed in between routes so you can rest up. But they only feature a Pokeball shop, which means you can't buy any healing items here. Speaking of the shops, I love the art that they use for the vendors. This is such a small detail and it adds so much charm and style to Pokemon Pisces. I mean, yes, it's just a regular old shop, but this makes it feel special in its very own unique way. But that's enough glazing for the cashier from me. Let's move on to this next route. It's clear that we're nearing Sootopolis City because it's filled with these nice white rocks everywhere. It also has a couple of ponds here and there, but the main thing here was of course the encounters we had to grab. As I managed to find the fairy type Fluffsir, Cutie, the cutest rodent you'll ever see, Kitty, who isn't a cat at all but a pest that populate the pond waters of Hoenn, and he is indeed a bug type. The last 2 I got here was Toxixot, the poison type, and Saintiso, the flying piggy bank. And shortly after, the road led us to Sootopolis, which had expanded quite a bit, and even the landmark where Groudon and Kyogre once fought has been preserved in the middle of the lake. While I was exploring the city, I bought a paper from a random guy and traded away my Mankey for a little dark panda named Vinci. But all of these side things were just distracting me from my main goal, checking out the gym. But first we need a quick introduction to gyms because they work a little bit differently in Pokemon Pisces. First things first, you need to be prepared. Stock up on revives, potions, and everything else that you may need to restore your Pokemon's health. Why? Because the entire gym has been turned into a gauntlet. Every trainer you fought is just trying to weaken your team for the gym leader, and you can't leave the building until you complete the entire puzzle and defeat the gym leader, or until your entire team gets wiped out, which happened more often than I would have expected. Because Pokemon Pisces isn't just a little baby game, it's actually quite difficult. difficult, and definitely in the early to mid-game. Once you get those final evolutions rolling out, things definitely go more smoothly, but for now, we're going to have to grind our teeth a bit. So let's jump in and see what this first gym has to offer me. When I entered, I was surprised to see an entire contest hall, but when you think back about the 8th gym leader in Pokemon Emerald, Hoenn, you might know he used to be a contest master, so now he has combined his two favorite elements of Pokemon and created his gym around it. I mean, even me as an underage kid could get some free soda pops here, which definitely helps if you didn't stock up on healing items, but believe me, the other gyms won't be as forgiving. On the second floor, there is an entire ice puzzle for you to complete, and once you do so, you fall through the floor right into Hoenn's performance. He will then scold at you for ruining his act and call over the barman, so you have to face him in a 2-on-2 double battle. And every gym is going to be a double battle because they are notoriously harder than single battles. But let's worry about Hoenn and his amazing new cape first. They started off with a Snarl and Hemoko, and believe me or not, but none of these are water types. So I sent out Kaiser and Skyliner, who could use Ember and Bubbles to take down the Snarl in just a couple of turns because Bubble has been massively buffed to a multi-hitting move like Icicle Spear or Bullet Seed, which can now hit up to 5 times. Once it went down, we even managed to burn Hemoko with an Ember, but Wallace was just getting started as he sent out his Big Shell Bivade. At this point, I started spamming Twister and Fire Spin until I brought both of them down to about half HP, then my starter got extinguished, so I had to bring out Heretic. And I started doing very little amount of damage with Rollout, and they were just picking off my team one by one. I even set up a grassy terrain with my piece of grass, which probably benefited them more than me, and in the end I was only left with Vinci and Jamal. These two spammed Nightshade and Rollout until the cows came home, and eventually all of their Pokemon would fall, as not even their fish with legs could run away from this, which concluded our first gym battle, and so we got bestowed upon the Margarita badge. And yes, I could go for one myself right about now, but I have way more important matters to get to, as Drake invited me over to the Cave of Origin. He tells me to go inside so we can meet up with someone who witnessed the clash between the Leviathan Kyogre and the Kaiju Groudon. Upon entering the sacred cave, I can immediately feel that this place used to be something special, and when we find ourselves at the little lake in the middle, we get approached by Wallace, the former champion. He tells me that this clash between Groudon and Kyogre sort of represents the divide in the Hoenn region, which right now has subsided. They say it's because a lot of people come to pray here to the two water-dwelling legendary Pokemon named Cheyenne and Lushan. A lot of people believe that it is because of them that Hoenn is going through this peaceful period at this time. But no one has ever physically seen Lushan or Cheyenne. And while all of this may be hard to believe, Wallace here fully puts his belief into it, because maybe one day he will be able to lay his eyes on these legendary Pokemon. Until that point, however, me and Wallace are going to be saying goodbye because we need to head over to Mossdeep City. And the only way to get there at the moment is through the Mangrotto tunnel that runs under Sootopolis City. And this Mangrotto was of course filled with new creatures for me to capture. Starting out with the little devil sprite, which actually has 3 different evolutions, and I didn't use a single one of them throughout my playthrough. I also got Magort, the bug type that should probably stay in the trash, Snotlout, the literal booger Pokemon, Umbrat, which is a fusion between an umbrella and a bat, which is stupid but also genius, and the last thing I ended up capturing here was a little bug type called Mandimite. Inside of this little tunnel, we also ran into a kid riding a dragon, and this dragon resembles Garfield. I personally never knew I needed a Garfield dragon fusion in my life, but Pokemon Pisces gave it to me anyway. I also completed a Rock Smash puzzle, which gave me the reward of an awesome piece of flavor text. After this, I followed around this weird egg demon looking guy, but never catched up to him. So instead, I stopped this businessman in his path who was on his way to his work, and instead of letting the man just move past me, I decided to battle him and hold him up even more. And he's definitely a businessman because his Pokemon battling skills were on par of that of a baby, with his Kodoff falling easily. With that win under our belt, we got some of his juicy cash and made it out of the cave. That led us to the Cosmos Bridge, which is this entire giant structure that's supposed to connect Mossdeep City with Sootopolis, but it isn't fully finished yet. But it is already inhabited by a couple of very interesting Pokemon, like the bug electric type Levlade, the little bunny Harris, Pisces, the tiny fire electric type flame Lumelmo, 3 aliens from out of space, Kriplin, Stomaway, and Hemoko, but the coolest one I found here was Retro Roach. This guy did not only have a cool name, great design, but also was the first relic type Pokemon I found. Relic types are super effective against fairy as well as dragon, but don't do so well against ghost and grass types. However, there are ways to defeat them with grass and psychic type being their weaknesses, and while they don't have any immunities, they are resistant to fire, water, and ghost types. But you're going to see me make a lot of mistakes against relic types because it took me quite a while before I figured all of this out. But I like having to find out what kind of moves are good against what kind of Pokemon. It adds a bit to the learning curve of Pokemon Pisces and really makes it feel like a fresh game. Speaking of fresh, my starter finally reached the appropriate level to evolve into Balburn. And while this flying devil pig reminds me a lot of Pig Knight, which is not good, believe me when I say his final form is going to redeem it 10 times over. I also looked around in the party menu and found out that at any time you can relearn your Pokemon's moves, which is a great feature. Then, as I was about to reach the end of the Cosmos Bridge and walk into Mossdeep City, I ended up running into this guy with a radiation suit on. He says this bridge is normally off limits for non-Ozone workers because they're doing some very valuable research here. And when we tell him to bugger off because we are going to pass here whether he likes it or not, he gets a little agitated but recognizes me as the supposed hotshot from Littero Town all those years ago. And now he really feels a desire to knock me down a peg. So that's when we have our first battle with our new rival, Ozone Scout Ray. He starts off with a Spinda, which now has different variants that are now finally viable in battle compared to the Spinda you all know and love. And while it was able to confuse Kaiser, I just used 2 fire spins to take it out and force out his Goldenrock. And I know better than to stay in against the rock type with my fire fighting type, so I sent out Skyliner and used a couple of bubbles to take it down. His final team member was a Retro Roach, and I of course had no idea what to do against it. But because it looked like a bug, I sent out Jamal and started spamming rollout until it eventually got squashed. Ray then states every excuse under the sun as to why he lost, and in his post-lost clarity state, he has finally realized that the rest of his team has left him here alone. And he says all of this is my fault because we are a dirty cheater who smells bad. And we don't have to listen to somebody who's just scolding at me, so we leave him in the dust and finally reached our destination, Mossdeep City. We immediately get greeted by this sage or cultist member who brings me to Steven Stone's house for a much needed talk. He explains to me that my father asked him to keep an eye on me because my father thinks we're already an up-and-coming master trainer, but Steven Stone isn't so sure yet. He thinks we still have a lot to prove, but if we ever get to the champion power level, he'll take me on a very special journey. And if we want to take our first steps towards this, we need to go and defeat the Mossdeep City gym, then come back here to his dojo so we can light our way through the darkness of it. So I wasted no time and headed straight over there. It still sort of works like the Tate and Liza gym you know and love, where you have to press these buttons to put the statues in the right order so you can pass, but there's one key difference. Once you get to the leaders, you see that Tate is no longer here. Without saying anything, Liza pulls out her Pokeball and sends out Lunatone. Maybe I lied when every gym battle was supposed to be a double battle, but this one is a double battle in the original and has actually been changed to a single battle, which I like a lot. But she clearly still loves her brother very much, as her signature Pokemon have not changed, starting out with Lunatone, who with a few zappers of glass bites the dust. Her other ace is of course Solrock, so I sacrificed 2 of my team members so we can bring in Broughton, who can cripple all of its attack with 3 charms, bringing it down to -6. It then tries to become more tanky by hunkering down and boosting its defense and special defense, but Vinci doesn't really care about that, as the fixed damage of Nightshade eventually overpowers it and wins the battle against Liza. And despite getting the Serene badge, we also get a couple of answers from her. Because she's psychic, she can read all the questions we had in our mind about Tate, and so we learn that he's on a solitary journey to find a unique place in this world, showing off that even twins can be differentiated by the goals they have. We then get sent outside and head straight back to Steven's dojo. He orders me to close my eyes, but when I open them again, I'm in this weird dark labyrinth. And as I try to find my way through, I get attacked by these shadowy figures that are hiding in the shadows. They inflict the new status condition panic on me in nearly every battle, and once you reach the end of the labyrinth, Steven goes on to explain that all of this was a test to see how I would react in emergency situations, because the panic status has always intrigued him. It will lower the power of all moves by a small amount, a good amount less actually than burn would do to attacking moves. And on top of this, all your panicking Pokemon will also spend twice as much PP, so while you're not losing any HP, you are losing PP and power on your move, so you want to get rid of it as fast as possible. Now that we've learned everything there is about panic, we can move on to the Precipike Bluff, which is the road that's going to lead us to our next destination, Lily Cove City. And this is also the place that normally gets you to Shoal Cave, which I didn't end up finding in my playthrough. But I did find these weird looking plants that are supposed to be Pokemon laying somewhere in the road. They're scattered around different locations in the region, but I never got the item to actually wake them up. What I did find was this beach with large trees and ghostly coconut crabs that were just begging to be captured. I also grabbed a Koda and evolved my ant into Terminite, who loves to explode with its signature move, Jump and Pop. I also saw a rich man being held at gunpoint by a child to jump in the water, but I didn't let it bother me too much and let them have fun and moved on to Lily Cove City instead. They've put a giant new building in the city, and this is now the Ozone Lily Cove Branch HQ. But unfortunately, we won't be able to enter ourselves as we don't have an appointment right now. So in the meantime, I wanted to do some relaxing and headed over to the new beach, where I fished up a Sharguy and Makibi and then moved on to this new section called the Scuddill Way. At first, I just entered this man's treehouse where I captured a Mosscopo and evolved Stargaze into Lepusite. Next door, there was also a berry shop with a sus-looking lady behind the counter, and a little further up was an entrance that led me to the cold mines. But the road here was blocked by huge avalanches that just happened, and we need to find a way to clear them so we can move on. So I sneaked back into the Ozone building and made my way all the way to the top. That's where I was surprised to see Team Magma and Aqua's admins Matt and Tabitha, who were holding a meeting, as normally these two could never be in a room with each other, and now they're somehow working together, or at least they're trying to, because one of them wants to allocate their resources to finding stuff in the desert and the other one into the Arctic mountains. And they are of course unwilling to split the resources because they want to allocate all of them on one of their causes. So in that moment, I step up to voice my very own opinion and tell them about the avalanche that just happened inside the cold mines. But they aren't willing to accept my proposal because we're just a random stranger. Instead, I'll be battling them in a 2-on-1 double battle so they can gauge what kind of person I really am. The redesigns look so weird, but I absolutely love the look of Tabitha in this one. He looks way cooler than he normally does. And Matt is still the raging demon that doesn't seem to care about anything else, just his goals. And their combined power starts off with a Comeback-U and Snorunt. And normally they set up a Sandstorm here, but because of Mr. Luck, we negate that with its Cloud 9 ability. And then spam Zapper and Protect to eventually take out the giant mole that's in front of me. And after they finish off my Roach, I bring out Lou, and with one more wing attack from Mr. Luck, Snorunt is down. Now we're up against the Ice-type Morrigan and the Ground-type Pebbler. Lou uses 2 Flame Bursts, combine that with a double slap from Stargaze, and Morrigan is down. This only leaves Pebbler, who can take me down with a rollout, but one more Mega Drain and Pounce from Morpoko puts me at the top of the food chain of this chamber. After the battle, Tabitha and Matt still argue with each other over what they should do, and Matt even goes on to say that he's going to lead his own branch by getting the perms from the bosses, who walk in just in that moment. And I'm surprised to see that the men who hate each other the most, Archie and Maxie, are now working together. They tell their admins to settle down and send Matt out of the room so we can talk normally. Maxie immediately remembers me as the friend of the former champion, and because of this, he immediately sides with Tabitha and tells him to go and clear up the mines so we can pass. He even gives me my very own Pokénav so we can make Thrive traversing this harsh climate that we're heading up to easier. So we head over there and Tabitha tells his men to clear the snow. And if you want something to do in the meantime, an old friend of his is hosting some kind of class at the local flower shop. And upon arriving there, we are surprised to see Courtney, who seems to have shook the craziness off of her and traded it in for a cute, nice new outfit. Little did I know that this class was about battling, and these three ladies that are standing in front of me are going to attack me to try and teach me everything about the new blooming status. The battles themselves were wrapped up quite easily, but what we learned about the blooming status is that it's mostly used by grass-type Pokemon. It lasts for 3 turns, and every single turn, the user heals 10% of its max HP. On top of this, almost every single grass-type move when blooming will get an additional effect. Like for example, Giga Drain will now also, on top of draining the opponent's HP, lower their special defense. And there's a lot more examples out there, but blooming is basically meant to make grass Pokemon more viable. Speaking of grass types, these are now Courtney's favorite Pokemon, and ever since Team Magma went down all those years ago, she and Tabitha went their own ways to try and help the world, as he's now with Team Ozone and she holds down her own farm in the middle of Hoenn. We'll definitely visit her once we make it there, but for now, let's go back to the icy rocks because the avalanche is finally cleared. But something different has come in its place, these weird Pokemon called Meryl Cores. They're normally used to guide electricity, but also work as roadblocks. And if you want to get past them, you need to turn off all of their signals by talking to them in specific orders. So after doing random shenanigans for a couple of minutes, I finally cleared the path and did this several more times throughout the mines until we eventually reached Arctaiga Road. This place was not only filled with snow, but also shivering cold ice puzzles that I had to slide through. And with a new route comes new Pokemon as always, so I captured the little dog Pomelonian, Snarl the burying bird, Lottabats the literal mountain of bats, Pidgeum the medium Pidgey, Matchlit, and finally Fogelhind, who had a very big mustache for being a girl. After all of this, my very own bat also turned into an umbrella, and we also ran into Pandu the businessman yet again. He still hasn't arrived on his job and seems to be in even more of a hurry than last time we saw him, so I held him up just a little bit longer by defeating him in yet another Pokemon battle. Once our battle was over, he told me to stop battling him if our paths would ever cross again, and even dropped a Protect TM while he was running away. I then healed up my team at the rest spot and hiked over to Zotpyre Shrine, a place filled with ghosts and graveyards. This is probably what Mount Pyre turned into after all of those years. So I immediately started searching around for some ghost-type encounters, and that's how I captured Iriko, Sakitwak, and Transera to the Dex total. A couple of spooks later, and boo, I made it to Zotpyre Village. And I don't really get a friendly greeting here, as the first person I run into is Ray. Apparently, he was hired by the mediator between Tabitha and Nat, and has found out that all of their infighting was mostly my fault. And now he's ready to take revenge with a Pokemon battle. So let's show him who's boss by knocking off his Pantney. Get it? Because it's a pants Pokemon, and we knock it out with electro webs from glass? Anyway, let's move on to his next abomination, Goltigator, a hybrid of what seems to be an alien, alligator, and goat. And while we were able to do super effective damage with a zapper, we did eventually get taken out, which meant Kaiser's fire spins had to finish it off. In the process, we did get frostbitten, so now our special moves won't do as much damage, but not to worry because a couple of bubbles from Lou extinguished Lumelmo. His final Pokemon is of course the trusty Retro Roach, so I swap in my Lottabats, and this guy actually changes into a big monster when he's at full HP, but changes back into its small form when he gets low. Kind of like Wishy-Washy, except with a nice flying type that looks way cooler. I lowered its defense with 2 Screeches and then used Bite to bring it down to red HP, but unfortunately because of all of its charge beams, special attack is now so high that it's even able to one-shot me. But this was the perfect opportunity for Moskopo to come in and hit it with the Sucker Punch. Now that Ray is defeated, I start exploring the rest of the village, and I'm absolutely in love with the style here. Nearly every single one of of these buildings looks beautiful inside, as they seem to represent hammocks from old Asian cultures. Besides the amazing architecture, some graveyards, and a couple of move tutors, there wasn't all that much to see here, so I headed over to the gym instead. Here you had to pass through a pillar maze that were sometimes protected by a barrier, and if you wanted to remove this barrier, you needed to find the monks in order to lift it. Once you found all of them, you can make your way over to the end, where you'll be greeted by the ghost and relic type gym leaders, Phoebe from the former Elite Four and Spencer, head of one of the battle frontiers. It seems like they have some kind of relationship with each other, but we can definitely see who's wearing the pants here. Phoebe, as she keeps Spencer in check while he tries to lash out at me. But we're not here to fight with words, let's battle with our Pokemon instead. They start off with a Boozart and Morph Tree, and I have Transera and Fogelhind as my starting duo. So the thing I start doing is hitting Shockwaves, Ominous Winds, and Shatters on the Morph Tree until it's finally cut down. Magnalure comes out next, and with a Spark, my Cloud guy is finally turned into dust. So I sent out Retro Roach again and combined Zapper with Mega Drain to take it down. Armageddon was the final Pokemon on Spencer's side, so I double up on it again using Shockwaves and Zappers to really hand them the L. Now Phoebe's side was the only thing we had to worry about, and Boozard was just confusing me the whole time. So now we can take revenge by once again spamming Mega Drain and Zapper until it falls. Misdreavus was the next Pokemon who inflicted panic on my Transera, and while we were able to do some decent damage, eventually she used Parting Shot to bring out her ace, Kowako. This ghost type was super strong and could even make my own Pokemon turn into ghost type so she could hit them for super effective damage. She can also boost her own stats with Ominous Wind and has a Shell Bell to recover her very low HP stat. In the end, I had to try and slow it down with Electro Webs from Retro Roach and lowered its defense with Screeches from Lotabats. I almost had it taken down after hitting a few bites, but in the end it healed up again and even took down both of my Pokemon. Now I only had Moskopo and Kaiser left, but once we hit the Sucker Punch Flame Burst combo, the ghost was finally able to rest. All that was needed to win this fight was one more Swift Punch on Misdreavus, and so the Your Badge was ours. And then head outside and hike down the mountain to reach Scuttle Way again, because this is where our next opportunity is going to arise. Because we have to cut down little trees and grab their weird sticks that they drop. With these weird sticks, you're able to enter these special trees that are scattered along the road. Once you get out of them, there's a huge patch of grass for me to grab more Pokemon, and that's where I found one of my most useful team members yet, Happy the Grass Ice type. The reason it's so good is because it has the Skill Link ability, combine that with a ton of multi-hitting moves, and you have a powerhouse on your team. Throughout the rest of the town, I ran into a tiny village that was made up of Safari Zone buildings, and one of them even had charcoal art for commission. So I gave them 5 of my sticks, and they turned it into a burned branch, which may burn the foe when the holder uses a grass type move, and combine that with Bullet Seed on the Pokemon I just got, and you've got 5 chances every single turn to burn your opponent. That is just broken. I also ran into a trainer with a Dracarot, and when I saw this, I knew I had to have it on my team. So I will now make it my lifetime's mission to get this guy one way or the other. But let's move on to the next route, which is the Canopore Wilds. This is filled with bridges that run across the trees and tall grass as far as the eye can see. And inside of said grass, I captured a Pitagon and Silverain, which could honestly be the 5th Sword of Justice after Keldeo. In the corner of the forest, I also managed to beat up a Shiftry who tried to boost his own stats, and as a reward we get the Eerie Mask, which protects the C-Dot line from status and stat drops while Tailwind is up. And there's plenty more items like these for different evolutionary lines, so if you think a Pokemon might not be good at first, you probably just haven't found the item for them. A little further up, I cut a hole in a bush which led me to some kind of hideout. Little did I know that the king of the bugs, Cultipex, lived here. He commands this part of the forest and demands that I leave, but I would rather challenge him to a battle. Once I slashed this overgrown housefly in a couple of 1,000 pieces, it finally saw my strength and crowned me with a silver crown. So I went out to capture a Flag and put the crown onto my very own fly. This not only gave him an HP boost of plus 200, 100, it also makes sure to put an infestation on the opponent every time he gets hit. So now we've got our very own bug prince. Once I eventually found my way out of the forest and into civilization, I traded away my Transera for a flapjack. Speaking of civilization, it seems like every time I reach a new city or town, I run into Pandu. And just like every other occurrence, we waste his time yet again, so he can't get to his job. To get away from me, he then jumps away in the trees and scurries away out of sight. So let's see what the rest of these trees have to offer me. And yeah, I never would have expected to find a shiny here, and definitely not for it to be a Pokemon that's not new. Nope, we got ourselves a blue Pawniard, which is beautiful, but unfortunately it never got used, so it stayed in my box. One of the treehouse people that was living here had another mission for me as well. I had to retrieve 5 of his kitties that were scattered across this route. So I searched around for a bit and brought them back to him. And as a reward, we get a long nose, which is going to boost the bug and dark type moves from Mosscopo by making them go first. Plus, it's going to drop a ton of stats if they'd manage to land. Plus, it lives 1 KO every time it's on the field, so this makes Mosscopo super broken. And because I wanted to try that out in battle, I headed over to my next destination, Tree City. The forest here has definitely grown a ton and the city has expanded. But besides getting a Yandemic that was apparently following me around like a stalker for the past couple of months, there was not all that much for me to see here. So I knew I had to find the local gym to see if Winona was still around. Once I entered, the only thing that got my attention was a peculiar man whistling at me. His name is Arun, he's an adventurer and knows that we're here to take on the gym. He's one of the leaders here, and normally he would have a battle with me with his girlfriend Winona, but she has gone off on one of her mountain climbs, and if you want to battle them, we have to find her first. So I scoured the rest of the gym, but little did I know that this mountain was going to be filled with puzzles. And these were definitely way harder than a couple of years ago, but eventually after a ton of trial and error, I got through it and reached the end of the mountain. That's where Winona urged me to jump off together with her, and so we landed in the arena for our double battle against her and Arun. And these two weren't playing around with a stellar duo of Dune Witch and Nosferaptor, which meant they were going to run a ground flying combo against me. So I led off with Stargaze and Zoldyck and used Protect and Icicle Spear to take down the bird immediately. Passowary was up next, and this ghost normal type was not going to go down easy. Plus it has Dark Void, and even though that might be very inaccurate, it is able to put both of my team members to sleep if it hits. Not to worry, because I swap out into Lou and use Double Slap to trigger the eject pack from Dune Witch and swap it out into Bourbon, and then Protect with Stargaze and use 2 bubbles on Bourbon to nearly take it out, but it did hit 2 earthquakes on Lou, which took it down. So I swapped in Flag and Stargaze again, and because I got hit by the earthquake when I came in, the infestation takes out the Bourbon. The turn after, Flag gets put to sleep by Dark Void, and we take down Dune Witch with Double Slap. The last Pokemon on the left side was a Bolterok, and while I am able to hit a couple of Bullet Seeds, we get put to sleep way too many times by Passowary, so while my team members are falling like flies, theirs get infested by mine. This chip damage eventually takes care of these 2 Pokemon, and that only leaves Winona and her Medion, who could not withstand a couple of Electrowebs combined with Vandemic's Spirit Breaks. And that's how we defeated the most adventurous couple of gym leaders ever and gotten ourselves the Horizon Gym Badge. This unlocked Fly for us, which is easy to use with the Pokénav feature, so after flying back to Forgery, I went south this time, where we would find the main base of Team Ozone called the Ozone Institute. And we all know who works there, our annoying rival Ray. He caused me a traffic jam that makes him want to drive on the opposite lane of the freeway, where he would of course swerve every car and avoid death masterfully. All of this thinking makes his blood pressure rise, and he blames me for that. So let's shut him down while we still can. He leads off with a Gumberee, and once it takes down my first Pokemon Stargaze, I swap out into Flag and set up 3 nasty plots, putting me at +6 special attack. All we had to do from that point onward was hit a Sludge Bomb on Gumberee, Megalito, Muda, and lastly Retro Roach to sweep his entire team. Now that he's dealt with, we can finally enter the Ozone Institute ourselves and see what they're up to over here. Apparently Tabitha here is planning planning a trip west to obtain some sensitive research and wants me to come with him. And because we need to head to Lavaridge town to get our 5th badge, this will be a perfect opportunity to team up. Archie is also hard at work here, saying that he loves his new job in the Ozone Institute because now he's actually changing the world for the better, and would even offer me a job if we weren't on our very important gym challenge already. With some last words of encouragement, I check out the underground desert pass, but unfortunately we can't get past here because the road is blocked by a giant fish Pokemon and the rest of the cave is blocked by strength boulders. So I just capture a Pebbler here and head west to meet with Tabitha. He tells me that the only way to get rid of these sleeping giants is by making explosive sounds with your mouth, because apparently they're scared of dynamite and explosives, which we're not going to use on real Pokemon. After making the sound, the fish will attack you. You can either defeat or capture it, and then you can move on to the rest of the route. And so we reach Manson Ride Hike, or basically the start of Mount Chimney. The lift is still here but not operational, so we'll have to get around some other way. So I headed north to the Ashlands, where I was not only breathing in toxic gases non-stop, I also captured more Pokemon like Inferno, the Fire Fairy type, and Kumbun, which is basically the Pisces version of Eevee, having 3 different evolutions. Once you get out of the Ashy route, you reach Fall Arbor town. Here we meet one of the sages yet again, and he gives you a magical map that will bring you to a buttload of treasures, but I never even ended up starting this quest. I went straight to Tabitha, who was here to provide me with some means of traversing the mountain. So he takes me to this random red-haired guy who gives me an acro bike that he pulls out of his pocket. With it, we could enter Mount Chimney and do some amazing tricks to skip over rocks and make it through the cave. While battling through some of the trainers here, my starter also evolved into its final form, Blazizahak, who might look like a fire, dark, or dragon type, but it's actually part flying now. And this demon from hell gets one of the most broken moves ever. Flare Crush. It hits 3 times but has a chance to lower the opponent's defense, and if it does so, it can actually hit up to 6 times for each defense lowering. So if you get lucky a couple of times, you can easily one-shot anything your opponent throws at you. I then tried to make my way over to the top of Mount Chimney, but I couldn't enter because of these 2 trainers that said we were too weak and would need authorization by a very powerful person first. So if you can't get on top of the volcano, you just have to go through it. And like that, I was able to capture the fire rock type Corusp, but I also ended up running into my second shiny. This time it is a regional Pokemon, Coptol. And I don't really know what to say. It's a rock turtle that yet again, just like Pawniard, stayed in my box. I am grateful for the shinies though. Eventually, I made it out of the volcano into Lavaridge town, where we get a warning from an exiting trainer who says that everybody here is crazy because they're eating these gross berries. So I think by myself, they can't be that bad and eat one for myself. This ends up not only poisoning me, but also some of my team members. So I went around town and nearly every citizen offered me some of these berries. So I kept on eating them until I built up an immunity to them and my Pokemon would no longer be affected. I also made one last stop by the move tutor of this town, where I ended up giving Kaiser, Bull Rush, Close Combat, and Brutalize. 3 super strong moves that will lower my own stats but can definitely deal some damage. With all of this out of the way, I felt fully prepared to step into the gym and see what Flannery had to offer. But upon entering, we get greeted by an old sailor who says that
If you want to meet the family here, they need to seriously pick our brain.
So we sit at the table with him and he forces me to eat one of the local berries, but at this time we are not weak to them anymore and our Pokemon don't get poisoned. He also asks me what I do for a living, so I say that I'm a taste tester for soup. After this, 2 of the other family members jump up from their tables and attack me to see if we're worthy of facing Mr. Moore. This battle wasn't easy as they had a Putragon and Decapod that both put a dent in my team, which was definitely a problem for the upcoming battles. Once they were defeated, they immediately got kicked out and the sailor then asks me what I'm willing to part with. We say nothing because we're just here for a gym battle and don't want to give away any of my money, and he seems to be totally okay with that. He also asks me if I've ever drop-kicked a man before, to which I answer several because I play football and that's what you have to do if you want to get the ball back. He also asks me if we've inhaled enough smoke from Mount Chimney, and my answer to that is literal coughing. And his last question to me was if I would run into a salaryman that needed to head to his work, what would I do to him? and of course, we're going to battle him. That finally wakes up the two heads of this family as Flannery and Mr. Moore are ready to take on my challenge. But we are at a huge disadvantage here, which I didn't think was fair, as like half of my team was already knocked out, so I had to use a couple of healing items to make it more fair. And Kaiser basically did all of the work after this, using flare crushes, bull rushes, and close combats to take down Solasu, Chafao, and Yangan Gran, so that only the left side was still standing. Here we faced Enigma with Stargaze and Mossdeep, and by using a ton of infestations, soul cutters, and double slaps, the egg eventually fell to all of the chip damage we were doing. Protagonist also took a couple of double slaps and infestations to the face, so we could move on to the final Pokemon, Caro Dorog. And with a few more leech lives from Mossdeep, this gym badge was ours as well. Now that we have acquired the temper badge, we can use strength outside of battle. So we moved some boulders and reached the swell-torn desert. After searching around some more, we found a very old pyramid, and of course, Matt from the Ozone Institute was stationed here. He's been spelunking in this place all day to try and gather enough clues so he can piece its history together. Because the people that live here in the desert get a lot of their money from research grants, and he finds archaeology real damn cool. That's why he's always here trying to push to get them funded, but Tabitha could never understand his thought process. But at least now that they've been separated by Archie and Maxie, he can do whatever he wants here. And next up on his list is me in a Pokemon battle. So let's give him a good one. Because he's such a fan of the desert, he even has his very own sandwich. But that's no problem, as he could send it back into the sand with 2 close combats. We can also break apart Krulpire with a close combat, Bulldoze, and ultimately Rock Blast from Zoldyck. Combacue gets downed by infestations from Mossdeep, and the final Pokemon, Stoleyes, dies to even more flare crushes from Kaiser. The battle over, we get to check out the Swell-Torn Palace all for ourselves, and this place looks straight out of Spelunky. Inside of here, there were some interesting Pokemon like Byaku, Maniko, Jaramera, and the big downtown boss of Empoleon, Blinguin. I also picked up the Sandstone from a random explorer here, which I used to get my own Dune Witch. I also evolved Webster into Lumandela and Flapjack into Toxie-Turf. I then climbed to the top of this pyramid here and found a monk that was meditating. He had never been defeated in any Pokemon battle, which I totally understood once he threw out his level 60 fish. You see, not only did this thing have an amazing ability that if given to my Pokemon would make them incredibly weak, he also had Hypnosis and Dream Eater to heal up his own HP. So I brought in Mossdeep to put an infestation on it and also lower its stats with my item. And once I got it down into raid HP, its Hondu Berry activated, which will surround him into a veil of water so he gets HP back every single turn. On top of this, it's also like 20 levels above all of my team members, so it was incredibly hard to kill. And the only way I could break the deadlock was by spamming items until its stats were so low that Kaiser could take it out with a dual wing beat. And so we defeated the monk and got the special Focus Sash item that's going to come in handy quite a bit. This is also a thing I love about this game. There is so many tiny side quests that just lead you to one very specific item that's super useful, yet the journey towards this item was somehow even more fulfilling than getting it itself. Anyway, after this, I continued to make my way through the desert by capturing a capybara and eventually reaching New Mauville. And even though the size of this city was super overwhelming, I couldn't even enter it yet because Ray showed up once again to stand in my way. He tries to insult me with some more cringy stuff, but I'm having none of it, as I'd rather do the talking on the battlefield. And I'm starting to notice that every time I fight him, he seems to have a different team, which reminds me a lot of N from Black and White, who takes Pokemon around his surrounding area to battle you with. Not that that's going to help Ray, because he's going to die in one shot from my Kaiser's Bull Rush. Next up was his trusty Retro Roach, who's on all of his teams, and this guy somehow manages to one-shot me with a high voltage with the electric terrain up. I wasn't all that worried because Mossdeep could Infestation and Sucker Punch it, which finally brought it down to under half HP before this guy also took me out. All I had to do after this was hit a Drillpeck with Blinkwin and boom, Voltage would come out. This pesky electric type not only switches items with the opponent upon switch-in, but also one-shots me with a high voltage. I proceed to use 2 more anger stomps with Jamal to bring it down to red HP, then bring in Pitagon to finish it off with a grassy glide. His last team member was a UFO, very clever name for this Pokemon by the way, and once I paralyze it with a Dragon Breath, I then bring in Dune Witch and use Night Dazes to finish off the battle. After this, we get a couple more parting insults and then enter New Mauville. That's where I run into a familiar face, Kizuna, who was with me on the SS title. He knows we're here to challenge Watson, but there is a couple of problems. Because Watson now fully took over this area and basically bulldozed the old city and built this instead, translates to him becoming a very busy businessman, one of the most well-known and successful ones in the entire Hoenn region in fact. He is however still a gym leader, but it's hard to get a hold of him these days. That's why you can just purchase the gym badge these days for 500,000 Pokédollars, but that is not only very expensive, it's also very unrewarding. But Kizuna here works for the man and knows a special way to get in contact with him, and asks us to come meet him in his room so we can talk about it. But I wanted to check out the rest of the city first. I realized that it's filled with new shops, apartments, and an entire lunch area, sort of like a big mall where people live in. On the top of the building, I was able to capture my own Meryl core, so now we can set up our own roadblocks. Psyche Twag also ended up evolving into Strongman. Now that we have this big muscly guy protecting us, I am ready to go into his house. So he knows someone that can get us in direct contact with Watson. He's the former director of Mauville Holdings, but he's never heard his name before. Only his title, which is the Storyteller. But he's just one person in a connected network of older men that have a lot of pull in this part of the region. So if you want to find the Storyteller, we need to chase down the other older men in this group to find his location, and the first one is going to be Giddy, also known as the Trick Master who used to run the Trick House on Route 120. Unfortunately, that Trick House has been relocated, so I already see everything before me. This is going to be a treasure hunt, but instead of treasure, we're going to be hunting old men. So we split up in order to find him, and I went to the Hatchloam Fields. This is the route where the former daycare was, but now it's become the home of Courtney's new farm, and she's willing to give me the location of the Trick House if we beat her in a Pokemon battle, which ended up being very easy for me as she has a full grass type team and I have a very good fire and bug type on my side. So with Flare Crushes, Drill Pecks, and Leech Lives, her Gumberee, Cardiovore, Hocus Pocus, and She-Drake all got destroyed. As a reward, she tells me that we need to squeeze through the pine trees at the north end of this route and then we'll reach the Trick House. But of course, I had to capture some Pokemon on this route before I went over there, and those were a Whelproot, which I've been wanting on the team for quite some time, plus a Walking Egg also ran into my Ultra Ball. Shortly after we reached the Trick House, and after getting the man out of his hiding spot, we ask him about the Storyteller, but in order to get answers, we need to complete his entire Trick House first. And there were 4 different rooms with digits for you to remember and then scramble into the right password for the door at the end. Once I had cleared all the rooms and deciphered the password, I came out on 2461, which was correct. I then knocked over one of his literal plants in a Pokemon battle, and boom, the maze was done. So Giddy tells Kizuna to come closer so he can tell him about the Storyteller, but instead of actually speaking words, Kizuna ends up absorbing the man, like they're now 2 minds in one body. I have no idea if this is a reference to anything, but it was quite clever and pretty funny in my opinion. Because Kizuna now has all the knowledge, he knows where we have to head next, and that's to find their mutual friend Rydell, who owns the bike shop in Mauville City. Once we arrive there, I recognize him as the guy who gave me the Acro bike in Fall Arbor, but he isn't just going to give us his knowledge straight away, as he wants to test us in a race against time. He'll give us a mag bike and we have to complete the entire cycling road in record time, and then he'll tell us what we need to know. So I bring out my best Eddie Merrick's impression and rode a bike like I've never rode it before. Rydell was so impressed that he would tell me immediately what he knows. They were apparently a group of 5 old guys that were running New Mauville back in the day, and considering we've already found 2 of the 5 guys, with the last one being the Storyteller, the next location we'll be heading off to is the docks in C Mauville. That's where we'll find the captain who can give us the location of the last 2 guys. While I was battling my way over to C Mauville, which is now the replacement for Slateport City, our Whelproot ended up evolving into Dracarot and then into its final form, Carodorog. After this, we reach C Mauville ourselves and see that there's an entire new market district. Here I pick up a ton of mints to give my Pokemon the right natures, and besides a couple more TMs in the choice band, I didn't really spend too much time here. So I went straight to the docks in instead to talk to Mr. Doc, who's having a retirement party, but he knows that all of his friends have forgotten about it because of old age. So he wants me to find Stern, Archie, and Drake so the party can start, and then we can ask him some questions. So I make quick stops at the museum for Stern, Ozone Institute for Archie, and biked all the way over to Fossil Beach, which is north from Fall Arbor Town, to give the invitation to Drake as well. We then took the boat to the southern island where his farewell party would be held, and after some beautiful words to all of his former colleagues, Doc asks to be reunited with his two friends, Giddy and Rydell, so Kizuna absorbs him as well, and now he's the unified minds of 4 people. This allows me to know where the 4th old guy is, and his name was Nob, and he runs a shop at the local market here. The problem is that he only speaks Japanese, so while Kizuna is translating, we can find out that he would like some tea in return for all of his information. So I find a guy in the market that sells tea but only accepts a foreign currency, which we don't have. But he talks really funny because he lost his teeth somewhere along the way. Then a robber tells me to go pick up a package for him behind the Pokemon Center, and after doing so, we acquire the Devon goods, but this seemed kind of illegal. Once we hand over the Devon goods, we get a Teachy TV as our reward, which we can trade in at the local Pokemon fan club for a Poke Flute. With this flute, we can wake up this girl's Pokemon, and as a reward, we get the gold teeth. We give these gold teeth back to the tea vendor, and as our reward, we get some free tea. But it turns out the Devon goods we stole were his, which he's not too happy about. So once we beat him in a Pokemon battle, the entire circle has been completed, and we can exchange this tea for the information we need. Kizuna absorbs Nob and tells me to head to the maintenance level of New Mauville. That's where we can use the basement key we just got to open it up and find the Storyteller. But this wasn't just as easy as walking in and boom, there he stands. No, you have to complete an entire maze around here, battling trainers, going through the old power plant, and while I was doing all of this, my Combun ended up evolving in its steel-type form, Ingbun and Inferno evolved into Purgadival. Eventually, we find a tiny little break area where we see 3 Nurse Joys taking a smoke break, and who's there standing in a corner all by himself? The Storyteller. He's happy to see that all of his friends have retired happily inside of Kizuna, but he isn't going to join his brethren yet as he needs to tell one last story. While his name does not matter, he does explain that once upon a time he was one of the wealthiest men in all of Hoenn. What changed this was the project of New Mauville. They were about to build a futuristic city of 70 stories high, but the execution ended up going very badly, and it was just a resource-draining flop, and that's when Watson came in, bulldozing the entire city and building everything that we see here. After this, the Storyteller retired and Watson took his place. Now that he was the big boss, he partnered up with Tycoon Scott and bought out the entirety of the Devon Corporation. And because of that, they now have the entire part of this region under their thumb. So when we eventually stand eye to eye with Watson, the Storyteller asks us to give him one last message, and that is to stay humble. With that done, Kizuna can safely absorb him, and with the power of those 5 men inside of him, he turns into a whole different person called Mr. Bonding. Now that he's become so important, he can definitely get us an audience with Watson, but he wants to know if we're worthy of an audience with him first by battling me at the top of New Mauville. He led off with the big hand of justice, Armageddon. So I put a nail on him with Strongman's gripping nail that hits 3 times, and the 3rd nail always puts a curse on the opponent. Then I brought in Kaiser to kill it with a Flare Rush. Papipus the Platypus was his next Pokemon, and with a Toxicorp and Toxic Heal, he became quite a bulky wall that could only be broken by Blinguin's Drill Peck. But this next Pokemon, Main Nemo, was a pain in the butt. It resembles a tick and always drains your life with Tic Tac, one of its signature moves. And the only way I could find to kill it was using Infestation with Moscopo to get some chip damage off every single turn, then going into Kaiser, who could finish it off by lowering its defense with Flare Crushes and then coming out on top. I then sent out Purgadival, and all we needed was a couple of Bitter Blades to kill Fluffery, Criminets, and Lucunejo. Mr. Bonding then goes on to tell me that the 5 individuals we searched for were once one man, who had a miracle set of powers called O-Powers. These were meant to be a gift to others to make their days better or easier, but towards the end of that individual's life, they fell in and traveled toward the desert, but he never came out. The 5 old men did. They never knew their own origin, but still harbored the inner drive to bring bring people together. So why was Kizuna the ideal vessel for the power of all those old men? Well, simple. A man that feels so powerless may as well be the perfect blueprint upon which to infuse power on. And now Mr. Bonding only has one more thing to do: fulfill his promise to me. We head over to the Verdanturf town gate, but we're of course not allowed to enter because we don't have special permission. But the moment Mr. Bonding steps in the room, the entire demeanor of the guard changes, as he's now being ordered to call his boss Watson, telling him to prepare to hand over that gym badge. After this, we say our goodbyes to Mr. Bonding and enter Verdanturf town. But Watson isn't the first familiar face we see. No, that's the green-haired kid Wally that used to be the rival of my rival. He invites me over to his house and is surprised to see me taking on the gym challenge again because adventuring for him seems to be over. All because of his damn disease and his lungs not getting better over time. He now needs to take medicine constantly, and the only thing he thinks about these days is the former champion who always seemed closer to me somehow. Anyway, he doesn't want to keep me up for my gym challenge for too long, and because we weren't that close in the first place, we end up leaving rather quickly. In another part of town, I traded away my Blinguin for a Gautera. This little fighting dragon monster is super cool because every time it uses an attacking move, its attack and defense get boosted super high, but its special stats drop. Then the moment he uses a special attack, the opposite happens. And when he's using non-attacking moves, his stats get spread out evenly. A super cool idea for a Pokemon that we're definitely going to be testing out. And what better way to do that than against the big man Watson himself, who's currently in a meeting with all of his shareholders and his partner Scott. When I go and sit myself down at the table, Watson and Scott immediately tell me I'm a rookie trainer and don't even want to give me the time of day by just giving me the gym badge without a battle. So they just hand me the Metro badge nilly-willy, but this felt really empty. But we are just going to sit here and take this, so I stand my ground and demand a gym battle. This definitely struck a nerve with Watson as he gets really mad and says that we're going to be pulverized by them. So I prepare myself against these two, and Watson's mustache is looking shockingly good. But we're still going to blow it off his face as we start off with Strongman and Karo Drog against their Goltigator and Walrus. I start off by doubling up against the Walrus and using Dig and Hammer Arm to take it down. Gliscor is next, so I use a Gripping Nail to put a curse on him, which is definitely going to cancel out his Toxic Orb. I try to double up on him for a couple of turns, but they use Protect and Breaking Swipe to try and cripple my attack, which didn't end up being enough as Hornleech takes out the Flying Bat. Then we put a curse on Goltigator while the last Pokemon from Scott's side, Silverain, comes out. And while they were able to double up on my Strongman to take him down, I could just bring in Percadivol to slice it into tiny pieces with Bitter Blade, leaving only Watson. In that same turn, his Goat Abomination falls to a curse, so he's forced to send out Capricola, who cannot do enough damage to take anybody out on my side, and with a Bitter Blade and Hornleech combo, we move into the final Pokemon, Spinda, who died just like the rest of his team. Once the battle is over, Watson gets pretty mad at me, but Scott takes this as a very fun match. So in the end, he's able to calm Watson down and they proceed with their meeting while we are forced to leave. We know our next destination is going to be on Dewford Island, where our opponent should be Brawly, if he's still the gym leader there. So I went back to see Mauville and traveled south towards the beach area that has now been stretched out massively. And with the Berserk gene I found in New Mauville, I was able to evolve Moscopo into its final form, Absolaria. And you betcha that this Jester Bug is going to clown on the opposition. I also made a quick stop at the Scorched Slab, which is a cave just under Mount Chimney where every single trainer you encounter will just explode. Not only their Pokemon, but them themselves will also explode in your face. So if you're ever wanting to do a Nuzlocke of Pokemon Pisces, which is already going to be hard, I would steer away from this cave. The only reason I came here was for a Moonstone to evolve Jamal into Combacue. If you surf a little bit to the left, you will also reach Ether Falls, but unfortunately we're not able to enter it because just like with Mount Chimney, we don't look strong enough. So I went back and tried to make my way over to Dewford by taking a long walk on the beach. And new routes are of course filled with new trainers, which made my Lou evolve into Ebirosashi, the Sushi Dragon Pokemon. Compared it to the official sushi Pokemon we got, Tatsugiri, and I would take this guy any day of the week. The Soda Pop House was also still around, but way more exclusive this time because they got so much popularity due to their soda berry juice, which meant I had to pick one up for myself, then surfed along the shore to capture one of the coolest Pokemon in this game. For me, Decapod. I mean, its launcher arm is literally in the form of a Sceptile head. And you bet that I'll be blowing away many of my foes with that cannon. Dewford town was then inside, but when I headed over to the gym, I found out that the 2 gym leaders were away because they had to investigate some suspicious activity at sea, and we would have to find them and bring them back here if we wanted that badge. So you already know I had to start scouring the 7 seas. First thing I found was this treasure den filled with skellywargs. These were sort of like pirate sea dogs, so I had to grab one for myself. After this, I faced their boss Skellywarg, who was hiding a ton of treasure behind him. Once the pirate got keelhauled, we picked up the cursed amulet from behind him and left the cave to capture a dolphin named Colfin. Shiny stone also showed itself on my path, which I used to evolve Biyako into Peheko, and with this large cat by my side, I eventually reached the Sailor's Paws, a dangerous shipwreck area where the currents are so high that they can drag you down to the bottom of the ocean. But there was even worse fate than that in store for me, and that was another meeting with my rival Ray. He had been stationed here by Archie to scan for any garbage dumping, but fortunately couldn't find anything. In fact, the only garbage he sees is us, and we need to be cleared out. So let's trash this team like the real garbage we are. He starts off with the Orca Pokemon Mystician, who sets up a psychic terrain upon entering the field. But don't worry, because all we needed was a Wicked Blow to send it out of here. Solrock then got washed away by a Hydro Steam from Lou. Beheko was up against his Retro Roach, but he got pierced by my Extreme Speed quite easily. His last team member, Mistomania, might have looked cool, but had no match against my Extreme Speed and Wicked Blow. And so Ray left me by skipping away on all the boats that were lying around. Now it was time for me to turn into a real sailor by traversing the currents like a pro and eventually stumbling on some broken down ships. While I was in these, I captured a cassowary and Beveg and moved back out into a different ship where we would find a former Team Aqua member, Shelly. She's now Brawly's girlfriend and has joined him in the gym, but the only thing she really thinks about is sleeping in her hammock. Luckily, the allegations were a false alarm and she can just head back to Dewford so we can take her on at the gym, but we still have to find Brawly first. So I go back to Mossdeep and travel north, where we find Icy Pike Cave. While inside, I had to complete some ice puzzles until we eventually reached Brawly and told him to go back to his gym. Once that was done, I captured one last Pokemon, Shiver Snap the Ice Poison Snake, and flew back to Dewford to complete the gym puzzle. Here we had to push unsuspecting people in the water to stop the currents so we could freely traverse the waters and eventually challenge Brawly and Shelly. They were running a water fighting time combo team with a Love Disc and Bishusha as their starters. So I sent out Jamal and Lou, who used Hydro Steam and Earthquake to do major damage on Love Disc and also take down the oversized rodent. Marsoyart the Karate P came out and kicked my Sushi in the face, but Jamal was still alive and with yet another Earthquake, Love Disc would fall. Shelly then sends out one of the most broken Pokemon in the game, Shelly Lou, who sets up a Geomancy with her White Herb to boost her stats immensely. They also finished off my Jamal in this turn and Beheko hid itself in its confusion, so I'm forced to bring out Forova, who used Hypnosis to put Shelly Lou to sleep while Beheko used an Extreme Speed to take down the P. Brawly's last Pokemon was a Toxicroak, and with one more Extreme Speed, it bit the dust. This only left Shelly's side of the field, and with a Dream Eater and yet another Extreme Speed, her final Pokemon Blabu was forced out on the field. And while it might look like a little baby, this is one of the bulkiest Pokemon I have ever seen. But in this fight, it wasn't able to show off its defensive prowess as we put it to sleep and killed it with yet another Dream Eater. And that's how we won the fight and earned ourselves the Beach Badge. I then headed outside and moved on to the next route to evolve Bivake into Luscaw. Not that I ever used him, but I found it weird for a shell to evolve into this thing. Anyway, I also used Mystician to put a panic status on Cassowary, which allowed it to evolve into Passoary and gave the cursed amulet to one of my Skillywargs to turn him into the big bad pirate boss. Diving through the next couple of rounds was my next option, and this eventually led me to Granite Pine Quarry, which is normally the place where you'll find Granite Cave. This time it seems to be excavated and filled with relic type Pokemon, and that's where I was able to capture my very own Magnalure. When you follow the rest of the sea, you eventually reach Petalburg City, but Norman and his gym seem to be nowhere around and we can't move on to Litterroot. So the only way left to go was over to Rustboro City, but the entire gate was closed off, all because they're investigating reports of potential gang members being in the area. So we had to go around and do some tricks on our acro bike to enter the Undura tunnels, where we would have to do a combination of caving and diving. Once you show that you're a true adventurer, you can get out of the cave and into Rustboro City, which has become a lot more crowded than the last time I was here. But the gym is still being led by Roxanne, so that was going to be my first pit stop. But I immediately got Vietnam flashbacks when I entered that building because it was a school, and I was never the best student. So when I heard she had become the principal and would only let me challenge her if we passed the exam, I immediately started panicking. There was lessons I had to follow from different teachers, including Lynette, who set up the entire PC system here in Hoenn, and when I was done with all of my classes, I would have to do a big exam. And don't tell anyone, but I just looked up the answers in Discord and got all of them right, which allowed me to go to the school gym where we could challenge Lynette and Roxanne in a double battle. Here we are going to be up against rock and bug types, starting off with Lydian and Krollpire. With just a single flare crush, the Lydian was already down and out, and after hitting a very hard-hitting close combat on Krollpire, we do get hit with a tar shot. This did major damage to both of my Pokemon, which set up their Cultipex to take both of my team members out. Then I brought out Skellywarg and Dagapod, who with their plunders and cannonades could blast away the competition. But we were then up against Ethereal and Shedinja. Shedinja went down easily with just a single cannonade 2-hit from Decapod, which broke its focus sash, and despite Ethereal taking down Skellywarg and Decapod, we still had Passowary and Shiver Snap remaining, with Fear Factor, which sort of works like a Ghost-type magnitude, combined with Shiver Snap's Glacial Lances, Ethereal would become dust and her final Pokemon, Montord, would crumble into a million pieces. And that's how we filled up our collection by getting the Amber Badge. Upon leaving the gym, a random guy steps up to me and tells me Mr. Stone wants to meet me at the local Devon Corporation. It's a very urgent matter, so we have to get there as fast as possible. Luckily, the building is just next door, and we aren't the only ones present. Roxanne, Steven Stone, and Maxie are also here, and they have some very bad news because our league certification has been blocked. All because they got a strong recommendation of someone affiliated with the league, the former champion and Norman's child, May. That means the completion of our gym challenge has been blocked, which means our gym badges will be taken away. However, Mr. Stone has a ton of sympathy for me and takes these matters very seriously. Roxanne even goes on to say that she vouches for me and doesn't understand what the former champion objects in this trainer. And I also don't really understand why my former friend would ever do something like this. I'm even starting to doubt if that person was ever a true friend at all. In fact, I even start to think that I know where they've been hiding all this time, and it's been in plain sight. So I turn to Maxie and tell him to call over one of his employees. And a few moments later, Ray enters the room. He doesn't understand why he's been called in here, but I am 99% sure he is my former rival behind that mask. Ray then comes at me and says it is ridiculous. Yes, he might be champion material, but he is no one that we ever knew before. And if it's really a fight we're looking for, this is the perfect stage with all of these highly ranking officials beside us. So before Ray takes off his mask, we have to beat him in a battle in front of all these people. And while his UFO is able to take down Beheko and Kaiser with a Focus Blast and Zap Cannon, we are able to bring it down in red health so Shiver Snap can finish it off with a Glacial Lance. Once it's done with its crash landing, Retro Roach shows up. Retro Roach then blasted me away with a Razor Beam, but Decapod and his cannonades combined with Dragon Claws made it out alive. We also managed to get Gumberee down to like 1 HP, but then Decapod exploded. So Sucker Punch priority from Skellywarg forced out his own Decapod, but I didn't have enough power to keelhaul him, so I had to bring out Passowary in the end. And with a few more Fear Factors and Doom Wings, his Decapod and Gaoterra ended up falling. And so we defeat Ray in front of all of these people and show that we're not a cheat. Which means Ray takes off his mask, but when he does so, we see a face that's unfamiliar. So he's not the person we've been searching for after all. After this, Mr. Stone gets a call from somebody else and apologizes for the entire thing. Because it's not my former rival that put out this entire thing, it's Norman himself. And he currently lives in Litterroot, so all we have to do is go and confront him and ask him why he's doing this to me. So without any further ado, we hit the road. First, I decided to pick up a magnet to evolve my Magnalure into Magnani Core. I then traveled through the new beautiful pink Petalburg Woods. And while the blooming trees were really nice to look at, that wasn't the only thing to see in here. We also had to give Pandu yet another run for his money, as after all this time he was still running late for his job. And once our battle is over, he promises to one day challenge me for real, but we have to stay out of his way until that day comes, so we agree to that deal. We also run into the largest birdhouse that I've ever seen, and inside we had to battle the boss Pokemon Old Fluky. Once defeated, he will drop an egg for you, and I'm guessing this will turn into the old Fluky himself, but I never ended up hatching it. Once we were done there, we reached Oldale Town, but there was not all that much to see here except for an entire new pond being added and a few more houses. Then I took a nostalgic trip through Route 1 and finally made it to my hometown of Littleroot, where I started my first Pokemon journey all those years ago. Not all that much has changed besides people moving into our old house and our lab being turned into a research facility. The only other change was a rest stop that was added, but we only had our eyes on one spot, and that's my rival's house. Upon entering, we immediately start scolding at Norman, who doesn't seem to know about anything that has been going on with the signature. But we have known each other for a very long time, and he knows that we're incredibly angry right now, so he offers himself up as a punching bag for a Pokemon battle so we can calm down. He still has a full team of normal types we all know and love, and starts out with a Linoon against my Kaiser. I was about to one-shot it with a close combat, but it used Dine and Dash, swapped it out into the Big Cat Excavator. This did do enough damage for Skellywark to finish it off with a Sucker Punch though, and after hitting it another one on Linoon, it dashes away yet again, taking me down and forcing me out into Magnanicor. Then I use Giant Spear and Bolt Strike to take out Passuary. Spinna is out next, and after paralyzing Kaiser, I can also take this out with close combats. I do a little bit of chip damage with Flare Rush on the upcoming Big Piggy Bank, who got frozen by Shiver Snap, and the rest of the battle was a piece of cake. Now that we've had some time to cool off, Norman finally explains to me that this has not been his fault. Somebody else must have forged his signature, which is kind of weird because it's perfect to what he normally does. So somebody in Hoenn's underworld must have had it out for me, and if we need information about any shady characters, we just need to go to the Seaside Casino in C. Mauville. So me and Steven fly over there to try and figure all of this out. Casino is heavily guarded by a ton of goons and criminals, but when you fight through them together with Steven, you end up running into the owner's throne room, and who's sitting there in his large sofa? It's none other than the shady Elite Four member from all those years ago, Sydney. Me and Steven start interrogating him, but he's not willing to talk, unless we can beat him and his assistant Lucy in a double battle. Their two leads are Jaromera and Nosferaptor, which we've already dealt with in the past. This time was no different, as a couple of Flare Rushes combined with a Glacial Lance takes both of them down. Their following team members, Muck and She-Drake, force me out into Magnanicor and Carodorog. We slash She-Drake in half with Dragon Claw, but Muck takes both of my Pokemon out with a racking up toxic damage. Sydney's last team member is a King Ambit who dies to a close combat and Glacial Lance, and Lucy's last team member stands no chance against my Pirate and Snake. And with the fight now over, we learn about the Forger. He's a very talented psychic that can forge any signature he wants, and apparently they called themselves the Doctor and refused to give any personal information. So now me and Steven are stuck trying to figure out who this could be. First of all, there's not a lot of psychics we know, and secondly, they need to have some kind of personal grudge against us. Our mind goes to a couple of people: Norman, Wally, Liza, Tate, and Mr. Bonding. In my thought process, it could only be two of them, either Tate or Wally. Steven debunks the Tate theory immediately, so that only leaves us with Wally. So if you want to find the rival of our rival, we're going to need some nice planning and coordination. So we meet Steven Stone at his house, where we can do just that. But when I'm on his doorstep, I suddenly start to smell spider lilies. Everything then becomes blank before my eyes, and I wake up in this spider lily forest. And if you've played Pokemon Omega Ruby or Alpha Sapphire, this should look very familiar. Once you step up to the pond in front of you, you'll get the chance to confront Wally. The reason he's doing all of this is because he's despised me for his entire lifetime. Ever since that first gym challenge, the real champion never cared about him. I seemed to be the only one he liked, and that made Wally incredibly jealous, as he just wanted recognition, respect, and to be their very best friend. And then when I showed back up in Hoenn and acted like I was the protagonist of life now, everything just snapped in his head. Yes, he used his ESP powers, forge Norman's signature, and prepare for my downfall. He even tried to stop me countless times by laying down that avalanche in the snow mines. Those boulder rocks that were blocking the path on Manson Ride Hike, he put them there as well. And on top of this, he also lured Shelly and Brawly away from the gym so we couldn't challenge it. Unfortunately for him, all of this was in vain, but he does get one last shot at taking me down in this here battle. And you can see from his sprite alone that this guy has turned into a mastermind of madness. The battle then commences with his Cool Mutt against my Kaiser. I bring it all the way down to red health with a couple of flare rushes, but that wasn't enough. So I brought out Passuary to use Dark Void, which put it to sleep. Then I sent out my Grass Dragon and used Leaf Storm, and because I have the contrary ability, my special attack now gets boosted by 2 stages. Then another one of those puts me at +4. When the Icy Dog is melted down, Wally decides to send himself out into battle. That's how mad he's gone. He's actually very strong as a Pokemon, surviving a +4 Leaf Storm and even taking down my dragon with a Psychic and 2 Dark Pulses. A pirate can take him down, however, with a Phantom Thief, but his Promiscubus was something I wasn't ready to deal with, as it kept on infatuating my Pokemon and killing them with Heart Steals. Eventually, after a Bolt Strike and Flare Crushes, she would fall. Vorion was no different. After this, I plundered his Shashta and knocked his Blanguin to the ground with one last close combat to win the battle. Wally doesn't understand that after all that effort and even throwing himself into the fight, he still lost. Because he failed here, this is going to be the end of the road for him, as Norman and Steven walk in. Now normally he would be put behind bars, but Norman knows this kid very well and even gave him his first Pokemon. So if he promises to leave me alone from now on, he'll get off with a warning. He agrees to these terms and all ends well. We meet back up at the Devon Corporation where my league certification gets reinstated. There's one problem: we have completed the gym challenge, but the Hoenn region has gotten rid of its Pokemon League, all in the name of unity and equality. Everyone here misses that grand final showdown. Because we've helped the region so much, they have decided to put up a special Elite Four member and champion challenge for me. All we have to do is go to the Ozone Institute, where we will face the 4 former admins of Team Magma and Aqua. And then when we're able to beat all of these, we get to face Maxie and Archie themselves. But after entering the registration room, we run into Ray, who just retired from the Ozone Institute because he won the lottery. Because of this, he thinks he has unlimited luck and tests me in one final battle to see if he can finally get the better of me. So let's show him that this fight is not even about luck, all we need is skill. We go balls against the wall, bull rushing his first Pokemon Toxitide and forcing out his Neo Roach, who vaporizes 2 of my Pokemon instantly, but they were able to get enough damage off so my dragon could kill it with a Draco Meteor. I then used Kaiser to crush Gamona, plundered Futage, but ended up going down to a Destiny Bond as well. Not to worry, as Kaiser yet again comes in clutch as he pummels Ayokuyoku, and Shiver Snap deals the final blow with Venom Strike. Ray takes this battle better than any other one, and even grants us one question, so I ask what his full name is. And he then says that Ray is short for Coriander. Coriander Jones. That might be the best name I've ever heard, and if we leak this information, he will find me and put my face on milk cartons. That's how we parted ways with Ray for good, but our adventure is long from over. So let's enter this Elite Four room and finish this once and for all. Starting with the far left room where we face Courtney and her Grass-type team. And it's safe to say that literally every single one of her Pokemon got beat by either Kaiser's dual Wing Beats or Flare Crushes, and on the other hand, Shiver Snap had to come in with some Glacial Lances as well, but this Courtney battle was by far one of the easiest in the entire game. I wish I could say the same for the other Elite Four members here, but Matt already proved to be a way harder opponent. He now runs a Sandstorm team and starts out with Turf, who would have been pierced by a second Glacial Lance if he didn't switch it out for Coldpire, who was strong enough to withstand my Pirate and Starter, but we did do enough chip damage for Carodrog to get a +4 special attack boost here with Leaf Storms and eventually take it out. Compactue also dies to a Leaf Storm, putting us at +6, and from here on out, it should have been an easy sweep if we didn't get frostbitten. Yes, we blew away all the giant owl's big feathers, but in the end, we got bewitched by a pile of sand. Not to worry, Glacial Lances are going to save us yet again, taking this thing as well as Glacial out the next turn, and once we went down to the Sandstorm damage, I had to bring in Magnanicor, who used his giant spear to pierce the battle. So we prepared ourselves to walk into the third room where we faced Tabitha. He used a Hail Team, which I was pretty weak against, and on top of this, he used the power of my own Shiver Snap against me to take down my Grassy Dragon. I then thought I was going to sweep with Kaiser's Flare Crushes, but got shut down immediately by Glalie, who was surprisingly bulky because even after setting up 2 Shift Gears, it was still able to survive a few Bolt Strikes and Giant Spears until we eventually got frostbitten again and died on the same turn as the Floating Head. The Pirate then used Phantom Thieves and Crunches to take down a Majestic Owl. Frostlass avoided landed way too many attacks with its snow veil ability, but once Pessoari put it to sleep, fear factors could take it down. For the last two Pokemon, we decide to fight Ice with Ice as Shiver Snap destroys both of them, so now we only have one more battle to go, and that's against Shelly. In this fight, she doesn't only run water types, also 3 Aura Whelms, which are these giant hydras that are super powerful. Luckily, I had my very own snake in the back who could take down the first one. Skill shots also brought Shelly loot to about half, but she didn't put a swift end to me. After this, I brought out my Kara Dragon and sweep the rest of the fight with Draco Meteors and Leaf Storms. Contrary might be one of the most broken abilities if given to a good Pokemon like this. I then ascended the stairs to the top of the building where Archie and Maxie were waiting for me by their plane. They've been watching and analyzing each and every one of my matches and are pretty confident in their own battling abilities. But I'm going to crush their confidence right here and now and become the strongest trainer in the region. So let's get it started against the Ozone heads, Maxie and Archie. They led off with Shiftry and Nosferaptor, who should have both died to a Glacial Lance if Shiftry didn't swap out for Gnarly, who didn't take it well either. Capricola was next on the list, and while they might have done amazing damage with Draco Meteor, none of it was enough to take any of my Pokemon down. So I used another Glacial Lance and Giant Spear to wipe their field clean, which meant Archie was already down to his final Pokemon, which was the Sailor Sea Dog with the pirate hat Warg. Because my Pokemon basically have no HP left, they both get taken down and Maxie swaps out into Gosmark. We down it with a single close combat, and this only leaves Shiftry. I thought from here on out it was going to be an easy win, but these two were way harder to take down than I thought, as they steamrolled through my team members until I only had Karodorog left. He can then use his signature Leaf Storm and Draco Meteor to take both of these powerhouses down, which results in a win over Maxie and Archie. But when we're about to be placed into the Hall of Fame, it suddenly starts raining very hard, followed up by sunshine a couple of seconds after, which means Groudon and Kyogre should be fighting again somewhere, just like all those years ago. So we meet up with Wallace to head over to the Cave of Origin to see if there might be any answers lying there, as we have no idea where the giants could be residing. Once we get over there, we see that the water that's normally bright red has now turned gray. That must mean that Lushan and Shayan were disturbed by the fighting of the two kaijus, and now they have fled to parts unknown to us. And without them, the harmony of Hoenn could be totally destroyed, which could bring a terrible age upon the lands. But we do have a clue. Shayan is also known as the deity of rising, which means it probably went to the highest point in Hoenn, which is Mount Chimney. Groudon could have followed it there. On the other hand, Lushan is the deity of falling, which means it went to the lowest point in Hoenn, which could be in the trench of the ocean beneath Aether Falls, and Kyogre could have followed it there too. So now all we have to do is head over to these two places, battle them to calm them down, and boom, everything should be fine. So we did hike to the top of the volcano where we saw the two giants fighting, and the only way to calm them down was to knock them out. So I ended up going into a double battle against Groudon and Shayan, and I have to say, Shayan might be one of the most majestic and beautiful legendaries I have ever seen. I'd definitely buy this fish if I had an aquarium. I also tried to capture them, but unfortunately they are not able to be captured, so we just had to take down Groudon with Leaf Storm from Karodorog, and a Glacial Lance from Shiver Snap also dealt the final blow to the flying fish. Now that these two giants were defeated, Groudon decided to go back to his sleep inside of the volcano, and Shayan turned into this small red orb. Wallace is going to keep a hold of it while we go and check out the Mariana Trench where Kyogre is fighting the giant mudfish Lushan, who looks a lot less majestic, but I guess that's what they're supposed to represent, yin and yang, two sides of the same coin. These two went down even easier than the last two legendaries we faced, with even more Leaf Storms and Wild Charges. The deal was sealed quickly. Now that Lushan has been turned into a blue orb, Wallace needs to perform a special ritual to restore them to their original forms. But we'll need the assistance of multiple talented individuals, which includes me, Steven Stone, Maxie, and Archie. So we tell Maxie the plan, and he says that this ritual can only be performed in the Golden Plains, a hidden sanctuary that is only known by a couple of people, and the only way to get there is with their plane. So we immediately start preparing and leave with the flight immediately. While we're flying through the air, Maxie and Archie reminisce on the old days because they're really proud of themselves for putting their differences aside and becoming such close friends. And they even ask me if I have such a close bond with someone, but that someone has unfortunately not been seen for years. But not to worry, as these thoughts are swiped away quickly when we land on Evergrande Road. And this place is truly full-on golden, but it's also filled with guardians called acolytes who have been trained up by Wallace and Steven to protect this place. And I had to battle over a dozen of them, and they all have incredible teams that were very hard to beat, but I knew that this gauntlet run would come to an end eventually, as we finally run into Pandu again and find his actual place of work, which is this Pokemon Center right here. He's the manager here, which is not entirely correct because he's the manager of every single Pokemon Center across the Hoenn region. This is just the one he personally runs himself. And every single nurse we have ran into so far in the Pokemon Centers are his daughters. Hence why he's always so busy, because he needs to make money so he can provide for them. And now that we have found this place, he's not too happy and is going to give me a battle that we deserve, with a full team of level 100 Kodos. One of them was even smoking, which I found a little weird, but I guess that's what you get for having such a stressed out trainer. Like usual, we easily wipe the floor with all of them, have a nice little chat with Pandu inside of the Pokemon Center to clear everything up, heal up our entire team, and go back on the way until we finally reach the Golden Plains. This holy place has been protected by the strongest in Hoenn for generations now. Steven and Wallace have even been appointed as deacons, which allows them to rule over the monks and protect this place from those who would seek to defile it. But this also used to be where the Pokemon League Challenge was being held, before the decision was made to do away with it. They also have the 2 orbs of the legendary Pokemon, so we can resummon them, so we can reap their divine rewards once more. But first, they must ask of me one final trial, and that is to defeat these 2 legendary champions in a battle. Once we're able to overcome that, we can overcome anything, and that will be the sign to restore the 2 great beings. So without any further ado, let's see what Steven and Wallace have in store after all these years. And I do have to say, they have some of the coolest drip I've ever seen on any person. And they even lead off with the Otohime and Golden Rock. So I try to go for a Leaf Storm but immediately miss. Glacial Lance does hit, but we end up getting frozen by a North Wind, and the Golden Rock also sends up a No Retreat to boost all of its stats. Because of this, we are able to take out Otohime, but our dragon also ends up falling. So I bring out Passuary, and Wallace sends out Promiscubus. And because it uses Protect, Golden Rock can just go for the SL Rock and finish off my Snake, while Fear Factor isn't even enough to take it down. So I send out Magnanicor the next turn and use Bolt Strike to finish off this tiny old statue, but he has yet another relic type in Armageddon. Passuary doesn't really do anything these next 2 turns, but Magnanicor and his Bolt Strikes are able to take down that Succubus. Wallace's last Pokemon is a Samarasu, so I start lowering its defenses with Kaiser's Flare Crushes, and with yet another Bolt Strike, we bring it down to 1 HP. Yes, Armageddon Sky Splitter one-shots my starter, and this only leaves us with a burned Magnanicor and my Pirate. I use Sucker Punch to take out Wallace's last Pokemon, and now we only have Steven left. We dealt with Armageddon easily after hitting him with a Bolt Strike and a Crunch, but in the meantime, Magnanicor also fell, so now it's my last Pokemon against his in one last showdown. We have the advantage as this Miracoli is weak to my Pirate's shiny teeth, and with 2 more crunches, the deal is sealed. This shows Steven and Wallace that we are more than capable of leading this ritual, so they hand me both orbs and order me to go and place them at the highest and lowest point in the valley. Once both of their altars have been reached and the balls have been placed down, we return back to the 2 champions. But there is one more thing left to do if we want to complete this ritual. The central fountain must bear witness to a showcase of a true bond between 2 individuals, and I am one of those 2. The other has just arrived behind me. Our oldest and dearest friend that we've been missing for so long, May, is finally here. And without even saying a word, we lock eyes, and when 2 trainers lock eyes, they of course have to battle. So let's see how strong May has become over all these years. She of course leads off with her trusty and iconic Sceptile, who doesn't even survive 2 Draco Meteors from my superior grass type. Speaking of grass types, this awesome looking Cradily was my next opponent, and while it might have survived a +4 boosted Draco Meteor, it couldn't kill me with a Strangle, so one more Leaf Storm also took this plan down. The sweep did not come into reality, however, because cast form was faster, and because of its fiery form, my Dragon's Leaves ended up scorching down. After this, I sent out my own starter and brought it down to raid HP with a Bull Rush, but this lowered my defenses and I didn't want to take another Mist Ball to the face, so I swapped in Skelewarg and used Sucker Punch to deal the final blow. I was then surprised to see a Combusken, but this awesome looking chicken was ready to throw some hands. So I used Magnanicor's Bolt Strike and Wild Charge, but if you bring electricity to a fist fight, you can easily send this chicken back to Colonel Sanders. The cutest little pirate Mudkip then came out, but little did he know that I had a way bigger pirate up my own sleeve. So after spamming crunches for a couple of turns while he was healing up, I was lowering its defense, which would eventually show that I do indeed rule the 7 seas. May's final Pokemon was an awesome looking Salamence, but we all know once he meets up with an Ice type, it's done and dusted, and that's exactly what my Glacial Lance did, piercing him right through the belly and winning one of the most historic fights in all of Pokemon. May then closes her eyes in defeat, and without words, me and my rival understood each other like no one else. Just like that, the ritual was complete, but we weren't out of the woods yet, as this large fish creature surfaced from the pond and transported us to a different dimension called the real Golden Plains. Here we hear a voice in our heads saying that the 2 beings have come together to create the deity of Golden Mean, who knows that we summoned him for another period of peace and prosperity in Hoenn. But it knows that this is not the only reason we've done this. We also wish for May's notoriety, and he will grant these wishes, but only if we manage to defeat this godlike being in hand-to-hand combat with our Pokemon. This is going to be harder than any test that has ever been thrown at me, but we are 100% prepared. So let's face Shenyang and restore peace to the Hoenn region. But it wasn't going to be easy. He's level 100 and has 2 different forms. A defensive one where he will either heal up or inflict statuses, and an offensive one that quite literally one-shots nearly everything I have. So I knew I had to be strategic. Or at least that's what I thought, because the only thing I did was spam Leaf Storms, Flare Crushes, and any other attacking move that I had in my arsenal. In the end, not even this big fish could take this battering for very long despite its very high HP stat, and with one last combo of Flare Crush and a Giant Spear from Kaiser and Magnanicor, we defeated the legendary Shenyang. He's impressed with our battling skills and grants our wish straight away, and once that has happened, we get sent back to the Golden Plains, but May is nowhere to be seen. Wallace and Steven, however, are very surprised to hear that Shenyang actually battled us, because that has never happened before, and because of that, they're willing to bring out one last ritual from the past. The Hall of Fame, where I get recorded as the strongest trainer Hoenn has ever seen, and that was the story of how I completed one of the best Pokemon ROM hacks ever, Pisces.